So this is a fantastic place to start, because the right answer, the correct answer scientifically, after doing a meta-analysis with hundreds and hundreds of studies of therapeutic exercise and core control, particularly for low back, Eyal Letterman came out very strongly saying that all of these are false. All of these statements are false. How does that make you feel? Like, I know I was a little disturbed the first time I saw that document come through, and the latest research continues to support Eyal's finding and the idea behind this idea of core control exercises to prevent back pain.
It's interesting. I mean, I remember not necessarily this topic, but I remember hearing things from you, from Alistair, and from Juan. Those are my top three people who are my mythbusters. So you hear something you don't know, you kind of think, well, it could be true, I'm going to go with it. And then you hear somebody who's more educated and more with research and really looking at not just one piece of research, but when people are doing these meta-analyses and looking at large groups of people over long periods of time, you can start to realize that, man, that's not really true. And it's hard sometimes. I remember, low back pain and core strength, that has to go together. It must, and it just doesn't. It might. And I guess that's part of the discussion of the, causation and correlation. Just because two things are happening at the same time doesn't mean that they're related, and they might be and they might not. And we need to just be careful not to make those assumptions.
Yeah, and there were actually, the continue on that research, and there were a couple of questions. One was, what effectively improved or decreased low back pain? And the other one was, what actually was shown to cause low back pain? And some of the things that he had come up with, again, being careful of causative versus correlative results, was that there was a correlation between increased compression from core control, too much core control exercises, and disc pathology. And that it was considered in the summary of his paper, his meta-analysis, the summary was that all of these papers were actually finding that core control was disruptive to the neuromuscular patterning of healthy core organization. So what he's referring to in this, and I think it's important that we always dive deeper into the research. What he's referring to is that when we are doing isolated voluntary muscle contractions, and the two particular ones that we try to mimic come from the work of Paul Hodges and Carolyn Richardson, which we interpreted it incorrectly, is what I think we need to be careful of. What they discovered in the study was that people with low back pain did not have normal timing of their transverse abdominis. And the extrapolation in the practical world or the clinical world was, well, we better strengthen that transverse abdominis. So we're going to get a sphygmometer put under their back and teach them how to hollow their abdominals or pull their navel to spine. And then you have the work of Stuart McGill, which was more, I just had a book here. Stuart McGill, a very famous author, thousands of papers, books out of Canada, that was basically looking at a powerlifting community and noticing that it was important that there was a sense of bracing to create stability with superload. So when you're lifting 400, 300 pounds, you really want to have this sense of bracing. Well, what both of them later acknowledged was that it was more about the intra-abdominal pressure that was required for the activity. And so the activity in Paul Hodges' study was lifting your arm up. That was the activity: flexion, abduction, and extension. And what they found was that the transverse abdominis at 30%, at submaximal, subconscious, contracted 50 milliseconds before the primary mover muscle. And that's what we need to take home. And that's what we need to talk about today, is how do we now move into the art of cueing with understanding the science. And the science says that the nervous system is anticipating the load by the task we choose to do. So in that study, the task was lifting your arm up, and the body knew that it had lifted the arm up many times before, and it knew to have a successful lift of the arm, there had to be a subtle contraction of the TA 50 milliseconds before the deltoid. That's it. And so that's all we needed. So now if I'm a volleyball player or a tennis player, or I'm rock climbing and I need a lot more, stability or intra-abdominal pressure for that activity, those muscles to work and do their job, accelerating or decelerating, then we're going to see the grading load go up in the intra-abdominal pressure, which is going to result in more contraction, more recruitment, more endurance of these fibers.
I think I just went back and listened to the last webinar that you did with Pam, and I wanted to just hear what she was saying, because so much of this we relate to and talk about at the same time as pelvic floor function. And, I don't know how many times both you and she talked about spontaneity. And I know that's a big thing for us, that, sometimes there is, like you said, you as a therapist might do a little bit of volitional work or work to relax. Sometimes it's the muscles are holding too tight. So whatever the modality is to get that to at least the muscle to be able to lengthen and shorten appropriately. But then right away go into something that puts it into, again, that we talked last time about the system. So that it's the whole body, the mind, everything happening together with some amount of load that's appropriate, until the person has that awareness. And it again becomes not my volitional thought of this is how I'm going to do it. It becomes natural and we don't think about it. Yeah. And we just worked with, I got to be part of the movement farm last week, and to watch these kids who were 4 to about 11 years old, they were running, jumping, climbing, doing all these things. And not one time did we talk about engaging a muscle. No one was teaching them how to rope climb by, engage your biceps. When we take it out of that, like the central core stuff, and we put it to the bicep. Well, if you're teaching somebody to climb a rope, you're not going to say, okay, well, now you're going to use your deltoid, but you're also going to use your tricep to straighten your elbow. Now, bend your arm by, engaging your bicep muscle. It's just,
it's your lats. That's here has to stabilize the scapula. Yeah.
Right. It sounds silly, but that's what we've done to the core. That's what we've done, like from our throat down to our pelvis. So.
Yeah.